A very popular drink in St. Lucia, the Creole island of St. Lucia, found between Martinique and St. Vincent and near Barbados. That very popular drink in the Creole island of St. Lucia would be Ditay Caco. Ditay Caco was something that my grandma used to have made every morning or most mornings for the family. My mom explained that the Ditay Caco was a very prominent drink in the household growing up. A wiki article explains that cocoa beans native to the Amazon rainforest are the basis of chocolate and Mesoamerican foods like Tejate. So I mentioned Ditay Caco, Ditay, and there is now a Mesoamerican drink called Tejate, which is a chocolate drink. I assume it sounded very much like what we drank in St. Lucia, or what we drink in St. Lucia, made from something called a cocoa stick, Ditay Caco, and now you have the Mesoamerican parallel of Tejate. It says Tejate is an indigenous Mexican drink. Tejate is a non-alcoholic maize and cocoa beverage traditionally made in Oaxaca, Mexico. Originating from pre-Hispanic times, it remains very popular among the indigenous Mixtec and Zapotec people, especially in the rural areas. It is also very popular in Oaxaca and the surrounding regions. The article goes on to explain the origin of the Mexican Spanish name Tejate is not known for certain, but is thought to derive from the Nahuatl, which means flowery water, from the Nahuatl language to mean flowery water. So Nahuatl, that language is explained to be a Uto-Aztecan language from the Uzo-Aztecan family of language. I perused the website describing St. Lucia's cocoa stick, or the cocoa stick made from the cocoa beans, which is traditional to St. Lucia. Our cocoa sticks are handmade by locals on the beautiful Caribbean island of St. Lucia. Cocoa sticks are made from freshly picked cocoa beans from the cocoa tree. The beans are roasted, deshelled and crushed. They are then shaped into sticks with a hint of cinnamon and then left to dry. The sticks are made from pure, unsweetened cocoa. I remember my grandma used to make those cocoa sticks. Not only did my grandma make those cocoa sticks, my grandma had cocoa trees growing next to her stream at the back of her home. And we used to head down there to play by that stream. And I clearly remember those cocoa trees and those cocoa pods on those trees. When it was time for harvesting and processing to make those cocoa sticks, we would split the cocoa pods after picking them. And of course, being young kids, we used to suck on the beans coming out of the cocoa pods. The beans from the cocoa pods have a fluffy white surface, which is quite sweet, and we used to suck on those surfaces, making sure that we will want to be very careful because they were quite slippery, that we do not swallow them and accidentally choke on those cocoa beans. But what is interesting is that after they were split open and then they were put to dry, the beans were roasted. There's a very interesting or special part of the process which is used in a mortar and pestle. That I would term to be a very traditional way of processing the cocoa beans, which we need to take note of. A mortar and pestle. Because after the beans were dried and roasted and the shells removed, they were pounded in a mortar and pestle. So a mortar and pestle, everybody is familiar with. It's probably the identity on the pharmacy logo or a pharmaceutical logo, with something to pound it and a round looking dish in which you place the substance and then you crush it or pound it. It's a mortar and pestle. So we had wooden mortar and pestles, big deep wooden mortar and pestles. My grandma would clamp it between her legs and pound down the cocoa after it had been roasted and deshelled. What was interesting is that while pounding that cocoa, it used to get hot and warm up and form an oily substance. There was, I think, oxidation or some chemical reaction going on that caused the pounding of the beans to become warm or hot. After they had been pounded, she used to roll them into sticks, into round looking sticks, almost like a hot dog bun. a hot dog bun, about long and round like a hot dog bun. So that would be the cocoa sticks. So the mortar and pestle is a very interesting technology to take note of in the process of preparing the cocoa sticks. Another interesting point, my grandma used a special ingredient to thicken her cocoa tea, or her Ditay Caco, the Tejate, also called Tejate in Mesoamerican culture. So what she would use to thicken the tea, or the substance, or the liquid, was something called, locally in St. Lucia, toloma. It is also known as arrowroot. So that arrowroot scientific name is called Canna indica, the white powdered one, not the yellow root. So there is a Canna indica or toloma arrowroot that when it is ground or grated and squeezed, a white milk substance comes out, and that is dried to make a whitish flour. That whitish flour was used as a secret ingredient in my grandma's Ditay Caco or Tejate or special cocoa drink. That was used to thicken it. I perused online and I found this article by Josie Gaffwitt from February 12, 2015 in the Smithsonian Magazine, and she quotes Hayes Lavis, a cultural arts curator for the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, and also Palka, a co-director of archaeological projects focused on Maya culture on the frontier of Spanish Empire. In that article, I found some very interesting quotes which I'd like to point out to you. It says the Olmec of southern Mexico were probably the first to ferment, roast and grind cocoa beans for drinks and growers, possibly as early as 1500 BC. There is no written history for the Olmecs, but pots and vessels uncovered from this ancient civilization shows traces of cocoa chemical theobromine in them. After the Olmecs, it is assumed that the Maya of Guatemala, the Yucatan and the surrounding regions also began to use cocoa. A painting recovered from the time shows cocoa in mythological scenes and even in court proceedings. In the early 12th century, chocolate was used to seal the marriage of Mixtec ruler Itdare at Monte Alban, a sacred site in the valley of Oaxaca. It's one of the few foods crops that was used as a dowry or part of a wedding ceremony in Aztec and Maya culture. Early records of Maya marriages in Guatemala, he added, indicates that in some places a woman would have to make that cocoa drink and prove that she could make it with the proper froth. Many vessels uncovered in the ruins of Maya buildings and burial sites have cocoa residue in them. A lot of pots were buried with the people, the ancestors. So cocoa beans were used as currency as well. And the seeds were so valuable that there were even forgery made of the seeds, because they found some clear ones that were not real cocoa beans. They explained that Aztec rulers accepted cocoa beans as tribute payments, and sometime in the 1500s you could buy a turkey for 100 cocoa beans. According to one of the archaeologists, an official Spanish account from 1618 describes the Belize River town of Lucu, which had much thick cocoa that turns reddish brown and tastes good by itself. Art recovered from the Maya lowland shows cocoa as a staple in ancient Maya. The fact that cocoa serves as a key cultigen and staple in ritual feast for numerous Mesoamerican cultures, and may I add, the Eastern Caribbean, as proven from my growing up and having some local knowledge about that, thousands of years ago, that it was in Mesoamerica, and somehow it found itself in the little island of St. Lucia. Makes it something particularly important to study and understand. So the local knowledge from my grandma, the plant cultivation, its harvesting, its processing, and even the preparation of the beverage or its use, proves that there is certain linkages by using local knowledge which can help us look back into the past to better understand our history. It is said that also chocolate have an ancient medicine and aphrodisiac use. Cortes wrote to King Carlos I of Spain, a drink that builds up resistance and fights fatigue. And one officer serving Cortez reportedly observed that Aztec ruler Montezuma drinking more than 50 cups of that drink a day. Probably he didn't drink 50 cups, but it was just pointing how important and how much they drank it. When the Spanish came there, they noticed that. I'm going to end with some statistics. But I will say that if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell for you that you can be told when a new video is released, and do subscribe. Statistics say that in 2020, global cocoa bean production reached 5.8 million tons, with Ivory Coast leading at 48% of the total, followed by Ghana and Indonesia. Ghana has recently decided that they want to process the cocoa into chocolate in-house and not export the raw material to Belgium and other countries. Cocoa beans, cocoa butter, cocoa powder are traded on futures market, with London focusing on West African cocoa and New York on Southeast Asian cocoa. Cocoa contributes significantly to economies like Nigeria, and demand for cocoa products continues to grow steadily at over 3% annually since 2008. Ditay Caco, I just started with that, and Ditay mentioned that. Cocoa sticks processed in St. Lucia to make that Ditay Caco. That shows you an idea of the processing and the technology and the skills being passed down from generation to generation. So Tejate and Ditay Caco, local knowledge. It is shining the path for us to uncover the connections of the past so we can understand our history better. Idi kui kwa. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell icon to be notified when a new video comes out, and we'll be seeing you for some more videos. Thank you.